In October 2019, a missing person report shook the quiet town of Columbia, Missouri, when Joseph Elledge, a young husband and father, reported his wife, Mengqi Ji, had mysteriously vanished. What started as a routine investigation quickly spiraled into a harrowing tale of secrets, suspicions, and tragedy. Mengqi's sudden disappearance, leaving behind her child and personal belongings, hinted at something far darker lurking beneath the surface. As the investigation unfolded, authorities would uncover shocking truths that turned this case into one of the most chilling mysteries in recent history. Joseph Elledge, a 26-year-old man from Columbia, Missouri, became the focus of a highly publicized investigation following the disappearance of his wife, Mengqi Ji, in October 2019. Originally from Kansas, Joseph met Mengqi while attending the University of Missouri. He was known by acquaintances as quiet and somewhat introverted, leading what appeared to be a normal life with his wife and their young daughter. However, beneath the surface, there were signs of tension in their marriage. Reports from friends and family indicated that Joseph had a controlling nature, and there were allegations of emotional abuse within the relationship. Despite this, Joseph initially presented himself as cooperative during the investigation into Mengqi's disappearance, even suggesting that she had left voluntarily. He claimed that Mengqi might have been involved in an affair, which he believed could explain her departure. As the case progressed, more disturbing details about Joseph began to emerge, particularly after the discovery of Mengqi's body. Evidence suggested that Joseph had been involved in her death and had taken steps to cover it up. His actions after her disappearance, including disposing of her body and attempting to mislead investigators, ultimately led to his arrest and trial. This case revealed a darker, more sinister side to Joseph Elledge, whose behavior and actions shocked those who knew him and left a lasting impact on the community. When Joseph Elledge first reported his wife Mengqi Ji missing, the case was treated as a typical missing person investigation. Officer Joseph arrived at the Elledge residence to conduct a brief examination, trying to piece together the events that led up to Mengqi's sudden disappearance. What immediately struck the officer was the collection of personal items Mengqi had left behind, most notably her cell phone and wedding ring. Both were lying on a table in plain sight, raising questions about what might have prompted her to leave them behind. For a woman to abandon such significant belongings, particularly her phone, suggested that her departure may have been more abrupt than a simple walk away from home. The officer made careful observations throughout the house, noting that there were no immediate signs of a struggle. The scene at first glance appeared calm and ordinary, except for the missing person at the center of it all. Joseph seemed cooperative, offering information as the officer began his inquiry. He told the officer that Mengqi had taken only her purse and possibly her black Nike shoes, leaving behind not only her daughter, but also the keys to her car, which were found in their usual spot in the kitchen. This added to the mystery, as her car was still parked in the driveway. Joseph then led the officer to an iPad that belonged to Mengqi. He explained that he had looked through the device to find clues about her whereabouts. While searching, Joseph claimed to have stumbled upon a journal-like document in which Mengqi confided details of a secret affair. The journal, according to Joseph, mentioned a man living in Shanghai, China, who Mengqi had allegedly been in contact with. Joseph asserted that this might explain why she had left. She was emotionally invested in this other man. The idea of Mengqi carrying on a secret relationship while remaining married and caring for their child painted a complex picture of her life that was unknown to her family and friends. As Officer Joseph reviewed the details, the journal's revelation of an affair naturally deepened the investigation. Joseph told the officer that he had even messaged the man Mengqi mentioned and claimed the man was currently in China. The timing of Mengqi's disappearance and her alleged involvement with a man overseas raised questions. Could she have planned to leave the country to be with him? Had her departure been planned, or had something more sinister happened before she had a chance to act? The officer noted Joseph's calm demeanor as he recounted these details, but something seemed off. While the journal entry suggested a possible motive for Mengqi leaving, her sudden disappearance, leaving behind her child, vehicle, and essential items like her phone, cast doubt on the idea of her departure being voluntary. It became increasingly clear that the investigation would need to go beyond the house and into the personal lives of both Mengqi and Joseph. Authorities began looking into Mengqi's digital footprint, seeking any signs of flight bookings, financial transactions, or communication with the man in Shanghai. However, their search turned up empty. There were no records to suggest that Mengqi had planned any immediate travel or that she had prepared for a sudden departure. Her phone, locked and inaccessible without a passcode, added to the difficulty of the investigation, leaving many questions unanswered. Despite the discovery of the journal and Joseph's insistence on Mengqi's secret love life, the officer's instincts signaled that there was more to this story than a wife simply leaving her home and family. The investigation into Mengqi Ji's disappearance had only just begun, and as more details would emerge, it became evident that the truth was far darker than anyone could have imagined. As the investigation into Mengqi Ji's disappearance progressed, Joseph Elledge began to recount a series of suspicious events that painted a more complicated picture of their relationship in the months leading up to her disappearance. These strange occurrences, according to Joseph, suggested that Mengqi's behavior had become increasingly unusual and secretive, leaving him puzzled and concerned. Joseph told investigators about multiple occasions when Mengqi left the house for extended periods without providing a clear explanation for where she was going or why she was gone for so long. One particularly bizarre incident stood out to Joseph, which he shared with the officers in detail. He recalled a time when Mengqi had told him she was going outside to retrieve something from her car. He didn't think much of it at first, but after about 45 minutes, she still hadn't returned. Joseph admitted that he began to worry, wondering why it was taking her so long to come back inside. When Mengqi finally returned, she was holding a pair of pliers that she claimed to have retrieved from the car. Joseph said the tool had likely been in the vehicle for 2 years, and the whole situation struck him as odd. Why would she spend nearly an hour outside just to bring back something so trivial? Despite pressing her for more information, Mengqi insisted that the pliers were the reason she had gone to the car, and she offered no further explanation. This strange episode only added to Joseph's growing suspicions about his wife's behavior. Joseph then recounted the events of the night Mengqi went missing. According to his account, he had gone to bed as usual, and everything seemed normal. However, when he woke up around 5 a.m., he was immediately struck by Mengqi's absence. He told investigators that he initially assumed she might be in the room with their daughter, Anna, who had been crying that morning. However, when he went to check on their child, Mengqi wasn't there either. Panic began to set in as Joseph searched the house, calling out her name and looking for any signs of where she might have gone. That was when he realized Mengqi's purse and her black Nike shoes were also missing. This was unusual for her, he noted, as she rarely left the house so early in the morning, especially without telling him where she was going. Joseph described the scene to investigators, emphasizing that nothing else seemed out of place in the home. Mengqi's car keys were still in their usual spot, her car was still parked outside, and other personal belongings remained untouched. This suggested that if she had left, it was on foot, which added to the mystery, given the early hour and the fact that she hadn't mentioned any plans to leave. Adding to the intrigue, Joseph mentioned that Mengqi had been acting distant and withdrawn in the months before her disappearance. He noted that while they had some disagreements, mostly over minor issues like renewing their daughter's Medicaid, there were no major fights or confrontations that would have led her to leave suddenly. Still, the extended absences and strange behavior, like the incident with the pliers, left Joseph wondering if there was more going on than he was aware of. As the investigation continued, these suspicious events raised questions about what had really happened to Mengqi Ji. Did she leave voluntarily, or was there something more sinister at play? Joseph's accounts of her behavior seemed to hint at deeper issues within their relationship, but without concrete evidence, authorities could only speculate about the true nature of Mengqi's disappearance. Each new detail, however minor, added to the growing tension surrounding the case, and it became increasingly clear that uncovering the truth would require a deeper look into both Joseph and Mengqi's lives. In his testimony to the police, Joseph Elledge emphasized that his relationship with Mengqi Ji hadn't been marked by major arguments or dramatic conflicts. According to him, their disagreements were minor, typical of what any married couple might experience. He described these disputes as small and inconsequential, downplaying any suggestion that there had been serious trouble between them. One of the most recent disagreements Joseph mentioned to the investigators involved their daughter, Anna, and her Medicaid coverage. Joseph explained that Mengqi had become anxious when she realized Anna's Medicaid was about to expire. As a responsible parent, Mengqi wanted to make sure everything was in order for their daughter's health care, especially with a doctor's appointment coming up. She had been stressed about the situation, pressuring Joseph to take action and get the Medicaid renewed as soon as possible. Joseph admitted that this had caused some friction between them. While Mengqi was insistent about resolving the issue, Joseph confessed that he wasn't as familiar with the Medicaid process as Mengqi had handled it the first time. He recalled how Mengqi had grown increasingly irritated with him because he didn't have all the necessary information to complete the renewal. He explained that her frustration was understandable, given her concerns for their daughter's health, but he characterized the disagreement as relatively minor and typical of parental responsibilities. Joseph stressed that while these small disputes arose, there was nothing that would have driven Mengqi to leave or suggest deeper problems in their marriage. He claimed their relationship, though perhaps not perfect, was not troubled by any serious or unresolved issues. In his narrative, Mengqi's stress over their daughter's Medicaid renewal was the most recent point of tension, but Joseph insisted that it wasn't something that would lead to her disappearance. This testimony, however, seemed to contrast with other findings during the investigation, suggesting that the situation between Joseph and Mengqi may have been more complex than he was willing to admit. During a media interview following Mengqi Ji's disappearance, Joseph Elledge presented a public image of a concerned husband, expressing his deep love and admiration for his wife. Speaking to the press, Joseph emphasized Mengqi's strength, dedication, and care, traits he claimed had drawn him to her from the beginning. He described her as a hardworking woman who was deeply committed to both their family and her professional life, painting a picture of a woman who was both nurturing and resilient. Joseph spoke fondly about how their relationship had developed over time, highlighting what he saw as her admirable qualities. He mentioned that Mengqi was very detail-oriented and dedicated, attributes that he valued. Her strong work ethic and commitment to their daughter, Anna, were central to how he characterized her as both a mother and a partner. He repeatedly emphasized that Mengqi's love for their daughter was unwavering and that she was an exceptional mother, always putting Anna's well-being first. However, Joseph also admitted that their relationship had grown distant over the past few months. While he didn't provide specific details to the media, he acknowledged that they had experienced challenges and that there had been some emotional space between them. Joseph described how their communication had deteriorated, and they were no longer as close as they had been earlier in their marriage. Despite this, he expressed hope that Mengqi would return safely and that they could work through whatever issues had come between them. Joseph's statements to the media appeared to be an attempt to show concern and love for his wife while subtly acknowledging the tension in their marriage. His emotional appeal was framed around the idea that, despite their growing distance, he still deeply cared for Mengqi and wanted her to come home. His public plea, however, contrasted with growing suspicions that would later emerge as the investigation unfolded. As the search for Mengqi Ji intensified, the police broadened their investigation into her disappearance. They began meticulously examining every aspect of her and Joseph Elledge's life, looking for any clues that might explain what had happened. The focus turned to Mengqi's phone records, bank accounts, and surveillance footage from around their home and other places she frequented. One of the first steps the investigators took was to comb through Mengqi's phone data. Though her phone had been left behind at the house, it was locked and initially inaccessible. After obtaining permission and technical assistance, authorities managed to access the phone's contents, which revealed several troubling details. Most notably, they recovered deleted messages between Mengqi and close confidants that painted a starkly different picture from the one Joseph had shared. These deleted messages showed that Mengqi had been contemplating divorce for some time. According to the conversations she had with friends and family, Mengqi had grown increasingly unhappy in her marriage due to Joseph's abusive behavior. The messages detailed how Joseph had been emotionally manipulative and, at times, physically aggressive. Mengqi expressed feelings of fear and isolation, unsure of how to proceed with her life while taking care of their daughter, Anna. As the investigation deepened, it became clear that Mengqi had been quietly making plans to leave Joseph. She had been researching divorce options and considering her next steps, all while hiding her intentions from him. The police also discovered financial records showing that Mengqi had been setting aside money, possibly in preparation for leaving the marriage. Surveillance footage from nearby cameras provided additional insight, showing Joseph's movements around the time of her disappearance. The recovery of these deleted messages and financial activity dramatically shifted the tone of the investigation. What had initially seemed like a missing person case with unclear motives now pointed to a domestic situation that had been unraveling behind closed doors. The revelation that Mengqi had been planning a divorce because of Joseph's abusive behavior introduced the possibility that her disappearance was not voluntary and raised new suspicions about what might have really happened between the couple in the days leading up to her vanishing. During the extended investigation into Mengqi Ji's disappearance, a shocking discovery shifted the case even further. While focusing on Joseph Elledge's behavior and the dynamics within the household, the police began examining the couple's young daughter, Anna, for any signs of distress or neglect. In doing so, they discovered multiple bruises on the toddler's body, raising immediate red flags about potential child abuse. When questioned about the injuries, Joseph initially appeared reluctant, but eventually admitted to causing the bruises. He claimed that the marks were the result of his frustrations and anger while caring for their daughter during Mengqi's absence. Joseph downplayed the severity of the abuse, framing it as a loss of control in moments of stress, but his confession was enough to prompt swift legal action. With this admission, the police arrested Joseph on charges of child abuse, recognizing that his actions endangered the well-being of the couple's daughter. The charges marked a significant turn in the investigation, not only because of the harm inflicted on Anna, but also because they provided further insight into Joseph's volatile temperament, raising more serious concerns about his involvement in Mengqi's disappearance. In response to the charges, the court set Joseph's bail at a staggering $500,000. This high bail amount reflected the gravity of the situation and the potential danger he posed to both his child and the community. Meanwhile, the investigation into Mengqi's disappearance continued to unfold, and the police executed a search warrant at the Elledge home. The search yielded critical pieces of evidence, including personal documents, a pair of muddy boots, and various items that would later connect Joseph to a more sinister aspect of the case. As Joseph remained in custody, law enforcement began piecing together a broader narrative of control, manipulation, and violence within the Elledge household, fueling their suspicions that Mengqi's disappearance was more than just a missing person case. Nearly a year after Mengqi Ji's disappearance, a significant breakthrough came when a hiker stumbled upon a grim discovery near a local river. While walking through the woods along the banks, the hiker found human remains partially buried in a shallow grave. Authorities were quickly called to the scene, and forensic investigators confirmed that the remains belonged to Mengqi Ji, bringing an end to the long search for her body. The discovery of Mengqi's body marked a critical turning point in the investigation. While suspicions had long centered around Joseph Elledge, the physical evidence connecting him to her death had remained elusive until now. Forensic experts collected soil samples from the scene, carefully analyzing the composition of the dirt near the burial site. These samples were then compared to the muddy boots that had been seized from Joseph's home during the earlier search warrant. The results were damning. The soil on Joseph's boots matched the dirt from the crime scene, providing direct evidence that Joseph had been at the location where Mengqi's body was found. This forensic link between Joseph and the burial site all but confirmed the police's suspicions that he had been involved in Mengqi's death and subsequent burial. The discovery also aligned with earlier phone data that placed Joseph near the river around the time of her disappearance. With the body recovered and forensic evidence tying him to the scene, the authorities moved forward with officially charging Joseph Elledge with first-degree murder. This charge signaled that investigators believed Joseph had intentionally caused Mengqi's death and then attempted to cover it up by burying her body far from their home. The year-long investigation had come to a grim conclusion, and the discovery of Mengqi's body not only brought closure to the search, but also paved the way for Joseph's trial, where the full details of the case would eventually be revealed. During Joseph Elledge's murder trial, he took the stand to provide his version of events surrounding Mengqi Ji's death. In a dramatic testimony, Joseph claimed that Mengqi's death had been accidental, the result of a physical altercation between the two that had escalated unexpectedly. According to Joseph, they had been arguing, and in the heat of the moment, a shove caused Mengqi to fall and hit her head. He insisted that her death was not intentional, portraying it as a tragic accident. However, Joseph's defense did little to mitigate the gravity of his subsequent actions. After Mengqi's death, rather than seeking medical help or reporting the incident, Joseph admitted to making a series of calculated decisions to conceal what had happened. He testified that he placed Mengqi's body in the trunk of their car and drove to a remote location near the river, where he buried her. He further confessed that their young daughter had been in the car during the journey to dispose of Mengqi's body. These admissions of covering up Mengqi's death and hiding her body raised serious doubts about Joseph's claim that it was an accident. Prosecutors argued that his deliberate actions after her death, including the year-long concealment of the body, indicated an intent to hide his crime rather than face the consequences. They emphasized Joseph's history of abusive behavior, pointing to evidence that Mengqi had been planning to leave him due to his emotional and physical abuse. Despite Joseph's defense that the death had not been premeditated, the jury found the overall circumstances too compelling to support his version of events. After weighing the evidence, including the forensic findings that linked him to the burial site, the jury concluded that Joseph was responsible for Mengqi's death, but did not believe it rose to the level of first-degree murder. Instead, they convicted him of second-degree murder, determining that while Mengqi's death may not have been pre-planned, it was a result of reckless and violent actions. After a lengthy trial, Joseph Elledge was found guilty of second-degree murder in the death of his wife, Mengqi Ji. The jury, after deliberating on the evidence, concluded that while Joseph may not have premeditated the killing, his actions were reckless and ultimately led to Mengqi's death. The prosecution's case, supported by forensic evidence and testimony about Joseph's abusive behavior, painted a picture of a marriage marred by control and violence. The judge sentenced Joseph to 28 years in prison, a significant sentence for second-degree murder, reflecting the severity of his actions, particularly his attempts to cover up Mengqi's death by burying her body and misleading investigators for nearly a year. The jury's decision brought an end to the case, which had captured public attention due to its tragic and disturbing nature. The sentencing provided some closure for Mengqi's family, who had been left to wonder what had happened to her for months. While the defense had argued that Mengqi's death was an accident, the jury's verdict signified that Joseph's actions, both before and after her death, were far from those of a remorseful husband. With the final sentence handed down, Joseph Elledge will spend the next 28 years behind bars, marking the conclusion of a case that revealed the devastating consequences of domestic violence and manipulation. The community and Mengqi's loved ones could now begin the difficult process of healing, knowing that justice had been served. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to stay updated with more content, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so please leave a comment below, whether it's your opinion on the case, any questions you have, or suggestions for future topics. Your feedback helps us create better content. See you in the next video.